Hey guys, hope you're having a great day. I wanted to go ahead and tackle the question of whether or not you can work while you're in occupational therapy school. I know this is a question that gets asked a lot, and so I thought since I'm in occupational therapy school at the moment, I could at least talk about my program and how people work or whether they work as far as my program is concerned. If you know what program you're interested in going to or you're working on currently interviewing at different schools, this is definitely going to be somewhat school specific due to like scheduling of classes and the intensity of the program. This is something I would definitely recommend that you go ahead and ask a student that's currently there because they're going to know and have much better insight into their own program than I will. But I can talk about my own program. So for my program, I would say yes, you can work while you're in occupational therapy school. There are people who work as like personal care assistants as little as maybe 3 or 4 hours a week or babysitting, that kind of thing. And then there are people who have full-on like part-time jobs. Personally, I think that's a little intense and probably more than I would be willing to take on, but there are people in my program who successfully are able to do that. At least as far as my program goes, I'd say there are a few things you want to take into consideration when you're thinking about getting a job. So the first one for my school is what semester it is. There are easier semesters and there are harder semesters. For example, at my school, the first semester is significantly easier than the second semester. So if someone is entering OT school, it is way preferable for them to have sort of a job and earn extra income during that first semester. And then if they still are able to continue it during the second semester, they can go ahead and do that. However, if it's too much, they can, go ahead and quit. And that makes way more sense than kind of coasting in the first semester and then trying the second semester when it's super intense to hold down a job. So if you know that you're going to need a job and you're interested in figuring out how you can make that work, trying to figure out the intensity of the various semesters is probably going to be beneficial in knowing whether or not it's really feasible for you to hold down a job. Another thing to take into consideration is the type of job that you're hoping to get. A lot of people in my school are sort of like a personal care assistant to people in the community, and because that's often like getting someone up in the morning or helping them get back to bed, it really doesn't interfere with the class schedule, and so it's pretty reasonable work-wise. There are also people who help and volunteer. Well, it's not volunteering, they get paid, but they get paid and they work at weekend camps. And so because we don't have any classes over the weekend, that's totally feasible for them to do as well, or any type of other job that would be primarily on the weekend. So, of course, what type of job is something you should definitely take into consideration when you're thinking about getting a job in OT school. At my school, I think there's one more thing to also take into consideration, and that would be what lab you select. So at my school, at the end of the first semester, we pick a lab that we're going to sort of do research in and commit our time to. And there are some labs that are definitely way more time intensive than other labs. So if you're somebody that knows going into school that you really need to hold down a job, just realistically choosing a lab that's going to allow you to have that flexibility would be extremely important, as opposed to going into a lab that's going to be extremely time intensive and really isn't going to have the flexibility you need to hold down a job. To basically answer the question, as far as my program is concerned, yes, you can work in occupational therapy school. Of course, I would definitely speak to someone in whatever program you're looking into, because programs are going to be different, and so while my school, I would say, yes, it's very feasible, not necessarily true for everybody. And also, it's going to be like somewhat based off of your ability and to sort of handle the workload of school as well as the job. So take into personal considerations as well. I hope I answered this question enough. If you have any more questions about this topic, go ahead, leave a comment, and I'll try and get to it. Hope you're having a great day. Bye.